Hey everyone, this is episode 281 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I am James, joined once again by Ryan and Paul, trying to get over it's kind of a crummy weekend weather-wise, and then the Brewers kind of soured my mood even more on Sunday. How have you guys been doing?
I'm all right. I have to stop talking about football on Twitter. I've become what I hate. I keep getting into arguments about which tight end is going to be the best, and it's a dumb argument because tight end's not even a thing. It's three separate positions, and you can't tell if any are good for 3 years. And I'm not going to remember any of these arguments 3 years from now. And also, I might be wrong, so I might not want. This is stupid. I need the draft to be over. It's
Welcome to draft
brain.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, this is why I like the MLB draft, because like the ratio of people who think they know things to people who actually know things is much better because nobody knows much about it. So you don't get nearly as much bullshit, right? Like it's much lower key, and people that are talking about it generally know a lot more. So you don't end up with that problem of like getting into arguments with people who think that they know stuff when they absolutely like they don't know things. Like,
yes,
so
I'm annoyed because I have a system, and I like when I argue with scouts, I have to query them on like, okay, the system says they weren't good at this one thing that I've determined is very important. And then nobody ever has a good answer for that when I do it. It's always, oh, actually, they're good at that, or the team hurt them in some way, or like, oh yeah, and it's the Arrested Development meme of this time it might work for us. Like that's what it ends up being. Like,
exactly.
No, we've been through this. We have hundreds of sample size on this being the case. This, by the way, this is specific to tight end yards per catch in college, which is a great proxy for being a good tight end in the pros. One of the highest touted tight ends in this draft is Michael Mayer of Notre Dame, who averaged, I think, 11.7 yards per completion over the course of his career, which is very bad. And I don't get this. Scouts love the guy. I think perhaps because of where he goes and some other stuff about what he looks like compared to some other players. But he's not as good as the other tight ends in this draft. So and I will die on this hill. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I'm very annoyed at it at the moment. That's all. I'm done.
I have a feeling
more football later.
I was going to say, I feel like you're going to be talking a lot of football because you guys are doing your NFL draft preview and such over at Reporting as Eligible. Aaron Rodgers still a Packer as we record this
yes,
too. So you guys were holding out until after the trade, and you're just going to give in like that and do an episode.
We have
to.
Yep,
come before the draft.
I thought we'd do 2 before the draft because I thought we'd have an Aaron show and a draft show, and he just wouldn't let it happen because that's how he rolls.
Do you think it'll happen before Thursday or Friday with the second round? What are you thinking?
Rumors flying around that it will be Friday and that the first round trade portion is dead, but we'll see.
We will see. Stay tuned for that. And before we jump back into the baseball side of things, reminder, as always, you can become a patron at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on Reporting as Eligible. So you're going to want to sign up for that. We got almost like 20 questions on the Brewers side today. The Sunday blow up had a lot to do with that, but also NFL draft week. So you're going to want to get that question priority. $5 a month, that level gets you that question priority, plus additional exclusive content, the Minor League Extra with Ryan and James Anderson, as well as Paul's NFL draft previews over on the Reporting as Eligible side with those mini pods. All good stuff to listen to before the draft gets underway later this week. All right. The Brewers started the year really well, right? They finished off that 10-game really tough road trip at 7-3. I guess historically one of the best 10-game road trips in team history, which I don't know if that's saying a whole lot, but it's still better to be on that end of history than the other end. They came into Sunday at 15-6, also one of the best starts in franchise history in first place. But I guess it just is another week where, at least for me, it doesn't feel like they're off to a great start, right? It's just like been this deluge of bad news, whether it was Brandon Woodruff's shoulder injury last week, this week we have Garrett Mitchell's shoulder injury, and he's out for the year. That's a huge bummer because I know all three of us were getting really excited about what he could do later this year. And all that happened before the Brewers bullpen got a big dose of regression on Sunday. So lost that series to the Red Sox at home. Still have series against the Tigers and the Angels coming up in this homestand. But man, I guess any impressions on the downer of the last week before we jump into these questions?
They were 4-2.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. They keep winning, but it's like all the off-field stuff is like, man, it feels like it's all going to come crumbling down at some point. And I tend to be an optimist. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it feels tenuous is the problem. Like, the injuries I feel like are going to catch up. The other thing that's doing it for me is they got passed by the Pirates in the standings, which,
winners of 7 in a row, the Pirates. Yeah.
And that might not keep up, but being passed by the Pirates makes what you're doing feel ephemeral too. And it's not like the Pirates, it's too early for Pythagorean to matter. Schedules matter a lot, whatever. But they're plus 25 and we're plus 27. So, like, who are we to cast aspersions at this point? And we're both being out differentialed by the Cubs by a substantial margin, which makes it feel even worse than it is. So, this will all get better maybe, but also, like, it might kind of crash down for the Brewers if they don't have pitching depth, which right now they kind of don't. So
it's that part of it is spooky. Here's one for you. The Brewers have lost 3 games at home. Guess how many of those games I've been to?
Oh, I bet all of them.
No, all 3 of them. Yeah. I'm 2-3 so far. So I have seen 2 wins, but yeah, this is like the reverse of my last year where I had
how many of them did Matt Bush screw up?
I think this was the first one.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good.
Yeah, they were behind early in, I think, the other ones. The other 2, I think, were non-competitive. Well, no, Friday night Bush pitched clean, right? He was fine. It was the other guys that had problems, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
He did have a clean game, yeah.
And then the other one was just like a non-competitive game. So, yeah, against the Cardinals. So, yeah, it's not great. It's the reverse of what I was last year because I had a really good record last year, and I know Laura Hemming of Twitter, Hemming and Hawing, she had a horrible record last year, even though like the team was off to a great start. She got off to a terrible start in games she attended. So these things do work out weird sometimes.
Some Ryan regression happening too there, I guess. But obviously Sunday's disaster led to a lot of questions. So let's just jump right into these Patreon questions. First, we have Lucroy's Suitcase, who notably sent this before Sunday, saying, "This bullpen has been amazing so far. How much negative regression are you expecting? It seems crazy that so many of these random guys have been lights out. Also, I don't understand how Hobie Milner has looked so good every outing I've watched this year. I keep waiting for the wheels to fall off. Is this just small sample BS right now?" And then following it up on Sunday, sorry for jinxing it. So, like you said, Paul, this feels kind of tenuous. We kind of mentioned that the Brewers are really good at one-run games so far this year, but that seems kind of fluky too. Yeah. So a lot of your warning bells going off right now about this bullpen.
Yeah. Well, the one-run game thing isn't really bullpen specific. It kind of is because bullpens are, it's hard to have one that's significantly better, but the Brewers tend to. Like, the Brewers actually tend to be good in close games under Counsell, when they've had Hader in the past, but they've had a good bullpen so far. But like, you don't go undefeated in one-run games. That just doesn't happen, and it's going to come. That's going to hit them at some point. But it does feel. Actually, the starting rotation feels much more tenuous than the bullpen does. Like, Matt Bush always makes me nervous when he's out there and did today. But by and large, I actually think that they're okay. I actually trust them pretty well to get through things. Where I get nervous about the pitching really is just in the big quality innings eaters being injured and that forcing guys to pitch longer than they otherwise would and go deeper, and eventually starting to wear down the depth of the bullpen and tire guys out. Like, that's where it's going to get. But I actually don't think that they'll have regression because of that. That's not really regression. That's like, you've been worked harder. Regression's bad luck. And they're 5-0 in 1-run games, but like, they're good in 1-run games. They'll be better than most teams in 1-run games. I'm fine saying that. But yeah, they've been lucky so far. They've been a combination of lucky and it hasn't caught up to them, and they're going to get less lucky, and the pitching is going to catch up to them at some point if they don't get guys healthy, which doesn't look likely in the near term.
Yeah, I guess I'm not super concerned about some of the bullpen stuff. Like, there are things about it. Devin Williams has only they've played 22 games and he's thrown 7 innings. That's not a ridiculous number. Like, you track that out to a full season, and now you're looking at that being, 60 to 70 innings? That's right in the sweet spot, right? That's like right what you want and expect for your best high leverage reliever, who's not, prime Josh Hader. Because we got more out of him back then when we were using him in a better way, but we've talked about that. Looking at some of the other stuff on here, I guess like Strzelecki and Milner have pitched quite a bit. Both have 10 innings. So that's a bit much, and asking them to do quite a bit. So that's a bit more concerning. Bush coming into today was 7.1. So they weren't asking him to pitch a ton. I guess they were and are sort of asking Bryce Wilson to pitch a bunch. But he's doing the Josh Hader thing. He's doing the classic Josh Hader from 2017, 2018 thing where he's pitching 3 innings at a chunk and then getting the next 3 days off. So Wilson is actually being used that way, and so far has been really, really good. He's been probably the biggest happy surprise out of the early thing here. Because, Williams is doing what we expect Williams to do, right? And Strzelecki, we all had high hopes for, and he's been very good this year. So I think he's kind of confirming that we thought he's quite good. And I think he is the answer to the question, who's going to go into the 8th inning role here is probably Strzelecki. And I have mixed feelings about that because I'd kind of like him to be available to come in the 6th and 7th if there's problems, more so than just sticking him into the 8th. That's why I thought Bush was kind of good for that, but we'll get more into Bush in a minute. But yeah, there's other ways this could go. When Gus Varland, who sounds like he's going to be okay after we didn't even get into the Gus Varland injury last week, very much
not a ton, yeah, super scary though,
yeah, but he looks like he's really quite good by Stuff Plus. The Stuff Plus numbers on Varland are really, really good, and so I think that I'm not super concerned about that stuff. There are individual things I'm concerned about here, and one of them is Matt Bush. So we'll get into that because we have a question coming up.
Yeah.
How about right now? Luke Zimmerman is asking before we get to Matt Bush, how long can the Brewers bullpen run with Hobie Milner being the only left-handed relief pitching option? Saying maybe that was the projected Ashby role pre-injury, but also, is there another legitimate setup man instead of Bush on the roster? So Ryan mentioned Strzelecki. Anybody else come to mind there, Ryan? Or is it just kind of like a committee thing?
Well, going back to his first question first, which is the left-handed thing, don't worry about that. The left-handed thing, you really don't need more than one, and it's even then, I don't know. I haven't looked deeply enough, but nothing stands out to me here as having massive platoon splits where there's a guy that you're just you don't want him to face lefty power hitters in that group, except Matt Bush, and that's a whole other issue that we have to deal with. But the thing about a second lefty for your bullpen, you can either potentially get that with guys who come up like Ethan Small, if he can get his stuff together and figure out what he needs to do to be a lights out reliever. And I think that's in the cards for him. You potentially have a guy there, or you just go get one on the trade market in the summer. Those ones I really don't worry about because you don't need having a loogie, a guy who can just get lefties out isn't really that useful anymore in the game because Manfred took that away. So having a guy who just specializes, I think people got it in their heads that you need 2 or 3 lefties to be able to go back and forth and play roles like that. And it's really not that way anymore. So I just do not worry about not having enough lefties. I think that's, and if they do want to have a second one in the bullpen for like the playoffs, that's a thing you go and do at the trade deadline, or like I said, you promote them. The Bush thing, I posted today. I was sitting at the game and posted like, I just don't understand what's going on. And it was because I hadn't looked at his Stuff Plus numbers. I looked at last year's, and he was exceptional last year. If you listen to the preview episode, I talked about the fact that like he was situated in terms of stuff and location plus, so pitching plus. He was right in between Burns and Woodruff of guys who pitched like 50 or more innings. Like Burns was like 19 and Woodruff was like 23rd, and Bush was sitting there at like 20. So it was like, that's why he's on the team. That's why he's getting the run that he is, and that's why they're putting the faith in him. But before today, and we don't have the updated numbers yet on Fangraphs, but before today now, he is down to a 117 stuff plus, which is still really, really quite good. But the location plus is 97, works out to a pitching plus of 100. And that is decidedly average. And for a high leverage reliever, that's pretty bad. You would want him to be better than that if you're going to be relying on him in high leverage. So I think I'm fine with, at this point, and I've been the biggest Bush booster of anybody, I guess. This is something with the name. I'm a big fan of Dave Bush too. So, but I think that I'm fine with saying it's time to demote him out of high leverage and have him pitch more in the middle. And then that becomes a question as to guys who are more middle relievers like that. You generally want them to be able to go more than one inning at a time. And I'm not sure if Matt Bush can do that. So you might start
not at his age.
You might start running into questions here about what his usefulness on the roster truly is. I think I want to see more still, because the stuff and all of that was so good last year, and his performance before he got to the Brewers was so good that it felt so fluky that he was as bad as he was. But now that the stuff numbers seem to be degrading, I think it's fair to be concerned at this point about where he is.
Yeah, I think that's the main worry with Matt Bush. Is he is an advanced guy, and he had that kind of comeback. Those don't always last that long necessarily. I mean, it's a weird profile to start with, but you got to be worried when you start to see stuff go south. And he definitely should get out of high leverage at this point with the stuff declining. Maybe he can get it back. Maybe a little stint on the IL gets that arm going again, but it might be over for him at any moment. Like when you get to the age that Matt Bush is, sometimes it just falls off a cliff, and we might be at that point with him.
Yeah, age comes very quickly for relievers, so you just have to be sort of ready for it to come, and that it sucks, but you don't always. I mean, this is part of the deal with also they paid him what, $2 million, 2.2, something like that. Like, you're not heavily invested in Matt Bush. You can move on pretty easily, but I don't think I'm not at the point where I'm like, get him off the roster now with him. It's more like I would like to not see him in high leverage for a bit.
Yeah. I think this is a scenario too where previous regimes, like David Stearns, is always pretty quick to cut bait with relievers who clearly didn't have it anymore, right? Like Neftali Feliz sticks in my mind because they gave him like 10 million and they cut him loose before May. So, like they've always been pretty quick to move on with guys as long as they have other options in house and, that the cost is not prohibitive. Right. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them move on super quickly, but also I'm not at the top of my head. I can't really think of who would step into those roster spots they haven't already shuffled in. Right.
Well, it might be Gus Varland coming back would push him out, but I don't know. The bullpen is going to change on a daily basis, though not as much as it used to. Like the heady days of 2017 to 2019 or whatever it was, where they were just running a shuttle between here and whoever AAA affiliate happened to be at that moment. That's not coming back because of the way the rules have changed, but there still is going to be quite a bit of shuffle here. Like I didn't even mention last week that Elvis Peguero was up. I mentioned him as a guy who could come up, and it turns out he actually already was up, and I missed it at my concerting last weekend. So the bullpen shuffle, I think people have almost gotten numb to it, right? Like people just expect that, oh, hey, that guy's back on the team again, and just to be surprised by it. Even people who watch on a daily basis that are heavily invested, it's hard to keep up with exactly who's on the roster at any given moment.
I mean, yeah, Peguero didn't even get into a game until Sunday, right? So it's easy to lose track of him too. Let's move on because we've got a lot more questions about the bullpen here. Nick Prill asking a two-parter here, saying, number one, has Hobie Milner's April been the shousiest month of lefty reliever usage since the real Brian Schaus was on a Brewers roster? And two, is one a quirk of the early season bullpen shuffle, or is it a stretch run playoff series against a team with a left-handed power hitter also going to feature a lot of high leverage Hobie? So I guess we saw a little bit of this last year too. Hobie Miller really good early in the year, people kind of clamoring for high leverage Hobie, and that didn't work out too well, Paul.
It didn't, partially because Hobie is he's not totally helpless against opposite, but he is a platoon guy, and he is going to be very, very, very effective against same side pitching. That's just how he is. He's, I feel like we all kind of understand now when we see the guys with the weird delivery that it's instantaneous. That's platoon guy. Like that's what that is. And so he's going to be dominant when he gets a lot of his dominance competition. And if he's exposed a little bit due to either, the rule or good pinch hitters or more strategically adept managers or whatever, he'll fall off a little bit. And if they try and push him into more of a regular role, he'll probably fall off a little bit too. So like I said, not a helpless guy, but this is early season, good usage with a healthy bullpen where you can maximize what Hobie does mostly. Not totally. He has faced plenty of both sides, but and he's good. But the longer you leave him exposed, the worse things would get over time.
Yeah, no, the ideal way to use him is how he was used today, which was you had Verdugo and Devers at the top of the lineup, the Red Sox really two best hitters, and also Yoshida there in the 4 spot, and using him in that part of the lineup to get those guys out in sort of the middle innings. That's exactly what you want to do. Looking at his usage, he's got 10 innings over 11 games. So by definition, not Shousey, because Shousey would be like 15 or 16 games to get to 10 innings.
Also true.
Right. Like that was
real Shousey is not possible anymore. Yeah. Exactly.
You literally can't do it anymore. It doesn't work. You cannot manage that way. So yeah, Paul's exactly right here that you want to be careful about how you expose him, and you want him to face right-handed batters in situations like if you have a right-handed batter who can hurt him, you want him facing them with the bases empty or with a base open, or somehow that he can get around that guy and not have to throw in and throw him strikes. You'd really like to have him be able to work around that guy and get back to his bread and butter, which is the lefties. So, and yes, the delivery is exactly what Paul said. Like it's that guy, like, and you can have that from the right side too, to a degree, but those guys are always going to have, there's always going to be issues with using them against opposite side hitters. And you have to be careful to not expose yourself and put yourself in a position where they have to face those guys in critical moments, because it's probably going to go poorly for you.
All right, moving on to the rotation, we have a question from Morgoth10 asking, realistically, has Wade Miley pretty much already played well worth the value of his contract? I imagine a couple decent starts still needed to do by the math to recoup the value, perhaps. I guess just wow all around to start this year. We talked about the weird out-dueling Yu Darvish last week, and he kind of kept that up again this week. So, Paul, I guess what's going on with Wade, and has he already made that contract worth it?
I mean, that's probably a slight overstatement to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to do the old exercise where, if he finished the season with 40 outs in a row, he'd still lead the league in hitting kind of thing. Like, I mean, what do we expect out of Wade Miley when we signed him? Like a 500 pitcher. So yeah, he's 3-1 right now with a 196 ERA. If you like give him 4 more starts that are kind of crappy, he's still pretty darn good. So kind of, yes. And the thing with Wade Miley is I feel like he is a prototypical guy who lives on the edge of like being able to be a major league pitcher. But when he's above those thresholds, he's really good. It's just that when little nicks or injuries or anything cuts his velocity just a hair, or cuts whatever spin rate or his ability, whatever, anything, when anything goes wrong, it goes very badly for him. So he's very much a sink or swim kind of guy. It's the beginning of the season. He's healthy right now. And he did this last time he was on the Brewers, like same exact thing. He was very, very good for a guy with crappy stuff, and not crappy stuff, but not a flamethrower. It also helps to have the Brewers defense behind him. So it's a good spot for him. As long as he is right, he can do this kind of thing. It's just you can't count on it going on forever. That's all.
Yeah, and I think a thing to note here, and it's also true with Hobie Milner as well. Yeah, the strikeout rate is, basically between 6 and 7 per 9. That's very low in today's day and age.
It is.
Like nowadays, when you see a guy under 9, it's like, oh, that guy doesn't strike batters out really. Like that's in this day and age, that's very low. But his strikeout to walk ratio 4.25, because he's not hardly walking anybody either.
Yep.
And so when you do that, when you keep that separation, Greg Maddux was sort of the master of this back in his day. Like he didn't have huge strikeout numbers for, a pitcher of Hall of Fame caliber, like his contemporaries, even like John Smoltz in his own rotation, or somebody like Randy Johnson or Roger Clemens. Those guys were striking out a lot of batters. But what he did do as well as they did was he kept the distance between his strikeout and walk ratio miles apart, because he basically never walked anybody unless he kind of wanted to. So the command was so good, he was able to do that. So that is really key. And I would say basically, yes, like Wade Miley at this point, Baseball Reference, the BREF page, Wade Miley's smiling visage is number 2 right there, in between Willie Adames at number 1 and Brandon Woodruff at number 3, making me very sad. So yeah, like Wade Miley right now, if you didn't get another inning from him for the rest of the year, I would be like, yeah, that $4 million or whatever it is they're paying him, I think it's about $4 million. Well worth it. Perfect. Great. Yep. That's fine. So yeah, it's one of those things where, and you're exactly right about this, Paul, that he is a guy that like, he's so dancing right on that razor's edge of being like not good, but he's still on it. He's still there. As long as he stays up on that line, like he's really pretty good. So I don't know how much longer you want to count on that going on, but
on Savant, his fastball velocity is the 3rd percentile. That's 3, just single digit 3.
Well, that means that there's 2% lower.
Yeah, there you go. So,
exactly.
Which is kind of amazing. Although there's like knuckleballers and underhanders in there too, I suppose. Although, is there an active knuckleballer right now? I don't know that there.
I can't think of one.
No, there isn't an active knuckleballer right now. That it gets written about every once in a while. Somebody talks about it and is like, "Hey, we don't have one right now." There are knuckle curves that are out there that have knuckleish qualities. I mean, we just saw one with Zach Gallen.
Yeah,
he's a knuckle curve guy, but not true knucklers. No, that guy. We haven't had one in a bit. I think. Since what's his face retired, the guy who went from the Mets to the Jays, R.A. Dickey, yeah.
I wonder if it might be over with base stealing as easy as it is. Like, now you can't ever let anybody on base if you're a knuckleballer.
Yeah. The last discussion I heard about this, and I have no idea which podcast it was on, but one of my podcasts, they were talking about it, and they said that a lot of people think it's just like trying to find somebody to catch it.
Oh yeah, that's fair too.
Like you have to have somebody who's like the Doug Mirabelli,
right?
That situation, you have to have that guy to like be willing to go in and just chase balls down and look like a fool. And yeah, it's not an easy gig to try to catch a knuckleball.
So 3% for Wade Miley, but no active knuckleballer. So that's actually a little better.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the other sad thing. We mentioned Garrett Mitchell, his season-ending injury at the top of the show here. We got a couple questions about
Hold on.
that.
Do we know that it's season-ending? Has that been confirmed?
It's most likely season-ending.
Yeah, because if he has to have surgery, it's probably the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
yes,
I think Monday they said he was going to be having a second opinion.
Yeah, and in second opinions, obviously, famously, you don't get those unless you didn't get the opinion you wanted the first time, right?
Indeed.
So probably not looking good. Adam Post here, though, asking about that situation and kind of the timing of it, asking if Sal Frelick wasn't hurt at the same time as Garrett Mitchell, he probably would have taken over center field, right? Feels like terrible timing for his injury. Might he still take over once he's healthy? So literally, we were talking about this. Literally the day we learned about the Garrett Mitchell injury, Sal Frelick got hurt in AAA and couldn't come up, and that's why we've got Mr. Perkins laying down bunts left and right now, right, Ryan?
Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing. This is one of those weird situations where we didn't even know we should be that nervous about Sal Frelick until after Adam McCalvy yesterday posted. I'll just read verbatim the tweet here. Brewers outfield prospect Sal Frelick is getting a second opinion on his sprained left thumb. So the ominous music plays.
Yes.
So it will be a few more days before the club shares a timeline for his absence. It sounds like the more they learn, the more they believe Sal has avoided a serious injury. So, like, I didn't even know I was supposed to be that nervous about it because guys get hurt in AAA all the time. But he is on the IL in AAA. And yes, I think there's an excellent chance he would be up right now, though. Well, yeah, he probably would be up right now. And I think part of that is this Perkins situation with him laying down bunts today, which I got really worked up about, by the way. You
were very extremely mad at
and
the ballpark about that.
I rarely say anything in my seats where I'm like I'm mad at the team and like saying something. And I was like swearing and it was family day and I felt a little bad, but I'm like, stop effing bunting. Like and like heads were turning my way. I'm like, oh, okay, I should be embarrassed. So anyways, yeah, the fact that they were having him do that or he was doing that on his own in those situations with no outs and a runner on second, laying down bunts.
And Joey Weimer on second both times.
Right.
Yes. Joey Weimer on second.
Yeah. And I'm going, okay, you probably don't have a lot of confidence in him or he doesn't have a lot of confidence in himself. Either way, this is a problem. And so I do think he would probably be up right now, but Frelick is off to a bad start. Like there's no two ways to splice this. Like Sal Frelick was not hitting for like the first time in his pro career. It was really kind of weird. His line to start the season, 232, 318, 321 in his first 65 plate appearances. This is a guy whose career professional batting average is over 330. So, like, he was off to a very slow start, and I think that there is something to this idea. This was cited with Grayson Rodriguez, too. Like, you don't want to call a guy up who's struggling. I think Brandon McCarthy talked about this, too, that, like, calling a guy up when they're struggling sometimes really does set them up to, like, failure and, like, go into, like, a spiral of regression. Like, they could start, like, overreacting and start doing things and getting out of their routines and all that. But you have to think he probably would be up right now, right? Like, he probably would be up.
Well, I think he might miss his window, I think is the main thing here, because I think he definitely would have been up. Like, had he been healthy, I think he's just the natural call up there. They don't want to lose. He provides what you're going to be missing, like good defense and the bats again. And Perkins obviously is. I had to double check reference to make sure that we weren't playing a former elderly Twins pitcher in the outfield today.
Yeah.
When that happened.
Yeah, not Glenn. He's Blake Perkins.
I literally did it like 30 times.
Like
it. No, it's a different
TV
guy.
analyst Glenn Perkins.
But Tyrone Taylor's going to be available fairly soon too, and I think he probably gets the nod once he's healthy. Especially, well, who knows if Frelick's going to be healthy anytime soon. But I think the window maybe is passed for this opportunity for him. So I think he would have been up for sure. And then, who knows what happens based on his performance. And now I think we end up waiting a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Perkins was hitting 292, 370, 417 to start the year in AAA. So Perkins was doing what he needed to do. He has the ability to play all over the outfield. So, like, he offers you that versatility, though obviously they have chosen to put him in right and have Weimer in center. So that does tell you a little something about what's going on there, too. But, yeah, it's a tough one because Perkins was a guy who was going to see time. And also, I think part of this is clearly Perkins was already on the 40-man, right? They had given Perkins a major league contract to sign him and bring him in as a minor league free agent this winter. So a minor league free agent signed to a major league contract. And so he already was on the 40, whereas Frelick would have to be bounced around. Though now, knowing that what we know about these other injury situations, I don't think Woodruff is yet on the 60, but he will be. So Frelick will probably go on for him. And Mitchell, I don't think, is on the 60 yet either. So there's another guy that can be moved to the 60 for the purposes of Frelick. The windows like this will come at weird times, and you never know exactly when it's going to happen. But yeah, you might be right about this particular opportunity, that it's kind of closed for him, with Tyrone Taylor working his way back. And they will be very happy to see him, because I guess today we did start to see, and Weimer has started to make contact on breaking pitches. So that's nice.
He's got 2 singles on breaking pitches now. So
he's starting, and not just that, but he's also made contact and made outs on other ones. He's putting balls in play on breaking pitches and non-fastballs. So that's important. But yeah, the thing with Weimer is still that he is doing this without striking out a lot. So they may be, well, we have a question about that. I'm just going to wait.
Yeah. Let's just jump to Jeffrey Emenecker's question here, who's asking about Joey Weimer. The question is, what has to happen for Weimer to be sent down if current form continues, i.e. great defense and not good hitting? Taylor and Frelick healthy, something else, Urias back. So I guess, Ryan, if you want to finish your thought there, is Weimer up to stay if he turns these things around, or do you think he's still kind of on the way down if Frelick is not out long term?
Well, if he does turn it around, and today could possibly be the starting point of that, potentially, right? Then no, he doesn't need to go back down at all, because the other stuff is so good. Right? Like, the defense is so good. The defensive versatility.
Defense is phenomenal.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Yes, phenomenal is not an overstatement, especially given the fact that he has
that
the
throw
arm
from right the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, he has the arm for right and the speed for center. And that combination is, let me tell you, really pretty rare. Like, Mitchell also had it, which is why he was playing center, but like, yeah, that's really pretty rare. At this point, Weimer after today is up to 219, 315, 328. That's borderline, but like, at this point, like, when Tyrone Taylor is healthy, the obvious send out is Perkins, because if he isn't going to hit in those situations and swing away, if he's uncomfortable or they're uncomfortable with him doing that, that's your dead ringer that he needs to go. But it does start to make things a little right-handed, right? Like that, Taylor and Weimer getting a lot of time in right and center. You're going to start looking for lefty plate appearances at some point. And, that's Sal Frelick, if he's healthy and able to come up. I just don't know how they would do it roster-wise. Like, how do you make that switch roster-wise? So kind of we'll have to see on that. But, yeah, I mean, Weimer's just, his defense is providing such a floor for him right now. And I think also just, he seems like a guy that people love being around. I don't know how much I want to read into like what I'm seeing on TV, but like, he seems like a guy that everybody just sort of has fun with. And I don't know. Yeah, I think that he's keeping his head just a touch above water as far as being viable for a roster spot at this point, is the way I'll say it. Like, his mouth is pretty close to that water line, and you worry about him slipping below. But right now he's kind of keeping himself just on that line. So we can kind of keep going at this point for a bit here.
Yeah, health's going to be just a huge factor. And if he's going to get sent down, they're going to need a couple more bodies at least up here for that to happen. But I think a big thing with the Brewers is K rate. Like his contact's not great. Like he's not pulling the ball as much as you would like for an ostensible power hitter. But he's not striking out. Like that was, I think, the big worry with Weimer was just he was going to K an insane amount, and he's not. And so I think as long as he plays good defense and is working on the contact part and getting some hits and using his speed, he'll be okay and will not get sent down. It's not going to happen in the near future for sure, and he could fall off a cliff. Like the league can always adjust even more than they already have, but I think he's up for a while and maybe to stay. Just the defense is too good.
Yep.
One more question on the Garrett Mitchell injury from Morgoth 10 asking, the Mitchell injury is incredibly tough. Personally, he was the player I looked forward to watching the most this year. How well will the Brewers' extended depth be able to shoulder the burden of his injury? Paul, you want to go first? We talked about some of that outfield depth that obviously if Frelick's out for a while, it kind of takes a hit.
It does, but when we were asked many times by many of you in the preseason, how are they going to find playing time for all these outfielders? Should they trade an outfielder? Right. What will happen? We said, like, people get hurt. It's a long season. People struggle, and outfield depth is good, and they'll find spots for all of them to play. This is that. It has now happened. And I loved watching Mitchell play too. He, of course, has a huge injury history, so this is not super surprising, unfortunately. But this is why they have the depth for this situation exactly. So, there can always be situations where injuries hit you so hard that you can't weather them. But and actually, they're kind of in that situation right now with Frelick's thumb. But they'll get back. They're going to get Tyrone Taylor back soon. They'll probably get Frelick back and playing at least in AAA fairly soon, hopefully, if Adam's not too wrong. But they can weather this fine. They're good in the outfield. They have a bunch of good defensive players. They have a lot of versatility. They should be able to weather this. They're well set up to weather this problem, and other teams are not. So, yeah, they have depth here, and they're going to use it, and it's good.
100%. Let's just go to the next question because, nothing new to add.
All right. Jay Google asking, with Hauser due back soon, what do you think the plan is for him? Do they go to a 6-man rotation? Does he go to the pen? Or does he start Ryan?
He's starting. They already said that. Council's already said that he's going to be.
Yep.
They're stretching him out to start. They're probably going to run him out at first on a little bit of a limited pitch count. So don't expect him to be out there for 100 pitches the first time out, even if things are going well. The big question becomes, what are you going to do with Colin Ray? Because Colin Ray would now become the 6th starter. And I think that you're probably going to see some piggybacking going on as a way to give their bullpen some more rest on those days. They definitely could use it. They could use some time like that. So I think Colin Ray stays up and gives them some of that. I think we saw in his start at Seattle, part of the problem was when he got into trouble, when the big inning happened, or big-ish inning, this is a big inning. He gave up 3 runs in an inning there. When that happened, the problem was he didn't have the go-to pitch. He didn't have an out pitch to be able to escape it. And so, Seattle was just sort of able to patiently grind away at him and put runs on the board on him by grinding, because even though, he didn't make any disastrously horrible pitches in that stretch, he just wasn't able to generate the big swings and misses and get guys out. So Ray is a limited guy in terms of what he can give you. But then again, Hauser is sort of as well, though he does have that crazy good sinker. So I don't know that I would necessarily want to use them to piggyback each other. I think they might be a little too similar for that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think maybe you'd want to have, if you're going to piggyback Ray with somebody, maybe it's Lauer.
Lauer is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, but thought process kind of along those lines. But yeah, Hauser's going into the rotation when he comes back, for sure. Council's already said it.
And nothing really to add to that other than, their rotation depth is what's being tested. And Hauser is, if nothing else, able to be a bit of a workhorse there. Yeah, he's a flawed pitcher, but he has shown value in the past. Their defense is set up well as an Adrian Hauser support defense, which is nice. They have one of the reasons he has struggled recently is their defense got worse, and he puts balls on the ground. So he might be okay, and they're going to do everything they can to keep him in the rotation because I think they can see they're probably going to need those innings one way or another over the course of the season. So that's where he's going to be.
Yeah, especially if you get into a run where you're facing a lot of NL Central competition and there aren't a lot of lefty power hitters left in the NL Central. I think that helps you. Like, who is the best lefty power hitter at this point in the division? Is it Nolan Gorman? Like, it honestly might be Nolan Gorman.
Might be Nolan Gorman. Frantically looking now.
Non-Brewers Rowdy Tellez division here, because Tellez, Tellez is the best left-handed power hitter in the division at this point. Like, I think that's almost undisputable at this point.
Hap's a switch hitter, isn't he? Hap from the left side, maybe, but
yes. So there's one for you, but it is slim picking. So this is good for the point is that this is good for Adrian Hauser because that was he doesn't have to face Jesse Winker anymore, guys. Jesse Winker's on his team.
Right.
So he doesn't have to worry about Jesse Winker just absolutely hitting tanks off of him anymore. Because that's what Jesse Winker did to Adrian Hauser was he hit tanks.
He did.
All right. Our next Patreon question this week comes from My Only Lemonade asking, I want to believe that this team is for real and that we've tapped into the 95th percentile of projections, but there's nothing eye-popping about them, and I fear regression to the mean, referencing a 7-1 record in games decided by 1 or 2 runs. Can anyone help me believe? I know the answer is a high floor, but that's boring. Paul, your take on that.
So all of that is true and worrying, and we're all good analytics people and understand that. But I think it's just worth remembering that they are a run prevention machine, and even with Garrett Mitchell out, they're still awesome at outfield defense. And that gives you a little more leeway, and it makes you better in close games because you're better able to protect leads, especially if your pitchers aren't giving up home runs. So they are, I do think they're walking a tightrope. Like, they have a bunch of offensive players who could crash down to earth a little bit, but they've got some room for improvement there too. And their starting pitching's kind of hanging by a little bit of a thread. We haven't talked about this yet, but also Corbin Burns. We'll get there. But
another shaky one. Yeah.
That defense and run prevention is going to be there all season. It's not going to slump. I mean, if the whole team gets hurt, whatever, but it's going to be a solid base for them to work off of. Even like a moderately better offensive performance versus last year is going to have them in far more games. Their on-base percentage is up this year, which is nice. And we may have some bouncy ball effects as well. And if all of that's the case, they should have a reliable win generating machine going here. So yes, they've gotten lucky in a few instances, but there's enough in this team that is repeatable that they should be okay long term.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there. I think that the defensive floor is a huge part of this, and it's going to allow their pitching to play better than basically its talent. In a lot of ways, you're going to get more out of them. So that does really help a lot in terms of that. And so, yeah, the high floor part is boring, but it's also true in this case. So you have that. And I think also we've already seen that the pitching depth being tested, and it's coming through better than it did last year. Remember, we lost our, I guess, 6th starter for the year before the season even got out of the starting gates in Ashby, and then lost the number 2 starter, after only a couple of fantastic starts. And they've managed to survive that really, really well to this point. And a big part of that is the defensive players giving them that flexibility to do that. So I think that on the offensive side, what they're better at this year, and I've talked to coworkers about this, and I was like, because they're like, it's so nice that they don't strike out as much anymore. And I'm like, well, actually, they strike out more than they did last year.
It's a weird perception, though. Yeah,
Genuinely surprising,
interesting.
honestly.
Well, the BABIP is much better this year. That's the main difference here, is that the BABIP is much better this year, and they are getting on base much better than they did last year, which, when you have guys on base, that's going to help a lot. Even though last year they actually did a pretty good job hitting with runners on base and runners in scoring position, even though nobody believes that's true, but they were actually like one of the elite teams of baseball at doing that. Yeah, so I think part of it is a lot of just comes down to batting average, and they've been good at like blooping hits over the infield in a way that like they didn't in the past couple years, maybe, or especially last year. So that's been a perception change as well. But there are things, and we're about to get into them, there are things here that are definitely concerning about the profile of this team, and why you can be legitimately suspicious of their ability to sort of hold on here and be an elite team throughout the year the way they have been. But I think everybody kind of understands that, you know, a 15-7 start is probably like a high water mark. You know, like, I guess when they were 15-6 after Saturday's game, that's probably the high water mark for win percentage for the season. Like, I know they could win the next couple games and then they would have a higher win percentage that again, but like we're at about the high water mark here, right? Like in terms of win percentage.
You're talking 9 over. Yeah, exactly. And I saw a tweet referencing this, making the point for the Pirates, but since they basically have the same record, the point still stands. Like 500 baseball the rest of the way gets you like 86 or 87 wins at the end of the season. So you're still like squarely in the playoff race just based on this really good start. Before we get into the offensive questions, we do have another question about the razor's edge that they've been living so far. Mattingsley's easy for me to say. Mattingly's Sideburns asking, given the Brewers' 5-0 record in one-run games, how big of a regression to the mean can we expect? The Brewers seem to consistently have a better record than most teams in one-run games. Is it the way Counsell approaches the bullpen? How he likes to punt games, that they are behind early? Paul, you're shaking or nodding your head, and we kind of talked about this before too, right?
Yes, those are all correct. The Brewers they go to extremes to protect small leads, and they punt on big ones, don't waste depth, and that does help them. I really don't think they are like a coin toss 500 close game team. They're like a 2/3 ish. If like they're going to, if they're ahead, win a lot of those games, like 80% of those games, maybe more. I'm making up numbers right now, but they're better than most of the league because of how aggressive they are in using their bullpen and how good their bullpen is to protect that. Like they really have a we don't care about tomorrow attitude to win those games, and every once in a while that does lead to punts the next day. Like that's just how they've decided to do things. But they're not going to regress like a normal team would in one-run games. They're just not. They have shown for many years now that this is a skill for them, and so like they're not going to go 40-0 in one-run games, but they're going to have a substantially better record than a lot of the rest of baseball. So it'll come back, but not a ton.
And there's a hidden thing here that doesn't get talked about, because today, guys, was a one-run game. It won't show up that way on the scoreboard. Nobody will consider it that afterwards.
Thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Like today was a one-run game. They were protecting a one-run lead in the 8th inning. It doesn't get much more like one-run gamey than that, I guess, other than you're protecting a one-run lead in the 9th inning. And the fact that the Red Sox then just demolished Bush and Guerra. Yeah. Steve was thrilled about that, by the way. So the having it be those that they just got pummeled in that spot. This still was a close game that they lost. I think it goes to show, like, Counsell was not hesitant about, like, he brought in Guerra, who is essentially their mop-up man at this point, to do that. And it just, it obviously led to a complete and utter implosion of the scoreboard. But did it really matter if the Brewers lost when Bush left? What was it? There was like 6. I guess Bush, a couple of the runners he put on scored after he left because Guerra let them in.
Right.
But, like, did it really matter? Probably not. They were probably going to lose that game almost certainly. And so the way that he does this is by, like Paul said, throws everything at protecting the tight lead. Throw all of the weight, use your relievers, do whatever you have to do to try to pull out those wins. And the flip side of that is sometimes you're going to have to just let games go, especially, and this drives people nuts in certain times of the season. He'll basically let a game go that's like a 1-run deficit in like the 8th inning, and it will make people insane. But it's all part of managing your way through the season and trying to hold those leads that you do have and keep those in the win column.
Yeah.
And it does
they
really
play
matter.
poker. Like they know when to fold them.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Turning our attention to the offense, as you guys mentioned, maybe some concerning trends here. Let's start with another Mark Podscarby question. Asking, what are your thoughts on all the opposite field hits Bill Contreras has? Do we need to send him to Paul as well? If you haven't seen the spray chart, I'm not sure William Contreras has a single pulled hit this year.
He does not. He does not have a single pulled hit. I mean, technically speaking, he does. Like he has some outfield hits that are to the pull side of center field, but not like.
Sure.
It's incredible how there's just nothing down the line for like 45 degrees. And, Yelich is psychological. Contreras, I honestly don't know. It's very weird considering how hard he routinely hits the ball. He has not pounded the ball quite as strongly as he did the last 2 years. His max is not up to snuff as per usual, but William Contreras hits the ball hard sometimes. Usually when you hit the ball hard, you're pulling it, at least sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you're getting massively shifted as a right-handed. Not, the shift's gone, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Usually you get a few dribblers through there. It's very strange. I'm really not sure what's up with William Contreras there, but he is really spraying the ball all over the rest of the field. He doesn't even have like an infield single to the left. Oh, he's got one. He has one infield single to the left side, or to the right side. That's it. It's weird. It's bizarre. I do not know. I don't have a good theory. Maybe it's trying to elevate it since he doesn't do that and just getting behind a little bit. But keep an eye on his chart. It's something special. I want to overlay it with
Bill
Yelich.
Schroeder's favorite catcher. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, so what I'll say about that is, yeah, you'd like to see a little bit more elevating and celebrating from a guy that was brought in for his power. And that's something you're going to want to see. Like, he has no home runs. You know who else has 0 home runs? Jesse Winker. If you told me that we would be on April 23rd and Winker and Contreras would have no home runs, I would say, oh my God, this offense is in a lot of trouble. And they're not. They're doing just fine. One thing that Contreras has done a good job of here is he's cut his strikeouts way down. He's down at 17% strikeouts at this point. So he's got that going, which is a positive for him. So we'll take that.
Also might be an explanation a little bit of this phenomenon of when you get to 2 strikes shortening up, sometimes that ends up with you going the other way. And maybe some of that is what's going on here.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. So he's doing a good job taking walks. Like the plate discipline aspect of things has been really good. And obviously, I mean, even if that wasn't true, his transformation defensively into, once again, one of the best defensive catchers in baseball after being, definitely not that when he was with the Braves. There's a lot going on that is positive in William Contreras' game. This weird thing bears watching, as Paul said, but I definitely am not on my list of things I'm worried about with this team. This is not on the radar. It's so far off the list. We're not really. Yeah.
Since we do mention it, we should note his framing is actually down a little bit. He is now in the 77th percentile. So something to keep an eye on.
Sure.
All right. Couple of exit velocity questions. So Bill Schroeder, Mike Vasallo will love this one. Effectively Wild. Thanks for the rec, BTW. Morgoth 10 says, in its latest episode, talked about if adding exit velo to the broadcast graphics would make sense. maybe wonder, are there any additions to the regular display you'd like to see more of? Personally, I'd love to see exit velo on every ball in play, for example. Paul, would that be a bit much for you, or you want that?
I'm not sure. It's useful. If it wasn't obtrusive, I'd be okay with it. Like, that'd be fine. It's not a great stat unless it's in conjunction with launch angle, at which point maybe I just want to see like a big, huge, giant X with the word barrel written across it pop up when that happens. Which
Basically
is
what they do in MLB The Show, yeah.
But it's like, it's fine, but it only goes so far if you're not elevating the ball too. So if it's not obtrusive, that's okay. I wouldn't want it like in the middle of action, but it's nice to see when guys are hitting the ball hard. So yeah, I'm down with it.
There's so many little things that you can flash onto the screen now that barely even register. They put, the pitch velocities on there, and a lot of broadcasts do have the exit velocity coming out of, at least often, if not every single time, even when it's not in play. And in the stadium, you can see that on every ball that is even made contact with. It doesn't have to be in play. They'll pop the exit velocity of the ball off the bat. So it's fine. It doesn't bother me. I can ignore it if I don't want to see it. And if I'm like desperate to see it, I guess the one thing that would kind of suck about it is it's probably going to flash too quickly and you're going to miss it because you're going to be admiring like the 430-foot home run and be like, oh, I wonder what the exit velocity off the bat was there. So
yeah. There's a class of fans that wants less stuff on the screen generally, like even that doesn't like the strike box, which I also kind of fall into every now and then. It does start to bother me. So I get people not wanting more stuff there too. And also, do you really like the crack of the bat tells you a lot of it too. So I could see it both ways, but I'd be okay with it.
As long as it's in a place where you're already having stuff show up, I don't see a huge issue with it. Like if you're adding another graphic to the screen, another thing, and I will say, I don't mind the K zone, except when they clearly aren't adjusting it from batter to batter. And you're like, that's at his shins, guys. Like you need to nudge that baby up a little bit. Like
that does happen sometimes.
It happened a few times this week. So that did bother me, but yeah, for the most part, whatevs. It's fine.
I will say, I know Bally has the exit velo and the launch angle on the home run graphics now, which is kind of fun to see. So you at least get that feedback on the home runs. But I guess we put this question first because Price Trozen has another question about the Brewers' exit velocities that are less than inspiring. So Price's question here is piggybacking on Morgoth. A recent stat chart showed the Brewers at near the bottom in both exit velo and launch angle. Do you think this is going to be a long-term issue or just a small sample ripe for regression? P.S. All these regression questions, I'm drunk already. So there is a link to a tweet here with a nice little quadrant chart graph here to show, and the Brewers are in the bottom left quadrant.
They sure
one
are.
That you don't want to be in that one in terms of more ground balls and lower exit velocity. Near teams like the Washington Nationals, well, no, they're worse, but the Mets are there. White Sox are kind of in the vicinity, but not really the territory you want to be in, Paul. Is this a concerning trend for you considering those two factors?
It's not great. So yeah, it's a concerning trend. And I think you can expect some improvement on it. Like when Winker plays more, I think he will add to it. Tellez has started to hit the ball harder. And this does happen when you also play a bunch of young guys all at the same time. And they are big drivers of this. If Urias comes back, who knows, he will help too. So I think a lot of it is young guys. They may or may not get better over the course of a season. But it might be a problem. It's not ideal to be there, and you don't always squeak things through. But again, it's not good for offense. But the Brewers can still win games with not that much offense. So, and they do have one thing that's not. We haven't talked about it, but they have a lot of speed, which also helps to negate some of this. Because if you hit doubles, that's great, and if you hit singles, that's pretty much the same thing this year in baseball if you guys are fast at all. So they've got some mitigating factors, but yeah, it's not a good sign. It would be nice if that picked up a bit. Honestly, kind of concerning.
Yeah, this is concerning, and I think I mentioned this already a little bit, but I want to put a finer point on it because I did look this up. Last year, the Brewers had a 279 batting average on balls in play, which the batting average on balls in play, for those that aren't aware, has been dropping throughout baseball pretty significantly over the course of the last few decades, and a large part of that is, we think, the shifting, particularly outfield shifting, which hasn't been in any way restricted yet. But that might be coming. We'll see. Hopefully not. But the infield shifting has been restricted, and we've seen a little bit of a tick up. I don't know. What's the latest on that? Is the overall BABIP in the league still up compared to where it was last year? Because it was up overall a little bit.
I think it is still up sorry, I can't look without having a giant ad blasting at me. So I think it is still up a tick from what I can see. Yes.
Okay. But the Brewers are up a lot, and they're up from 279 last year to 320 this year. And that does one smack of regression is coming on that.
Yeah,
for sure. I think that it would be crazy to expect them to maintain that. On the other hand, I don't think it would be fair at all, given that we know that the infield shifting has gone away, and that does seem to have had some effect. Like, they've limited the amount of infield shifting you can do. Okay. And also just the fact that the Brewers have brought up a bunch of guys who are really fast, and they're giving plate appearances and will continue to. Like, yes, Garrett Mitchell's probably out for the year, but insert Sal Frelick, and he is not as fast, but also very, very fast. Yeah. So I think that as long as they have a lot of fast guys out there, that is going to help, and it does improve your BABIP when you have fast guys, right? Like, you put the ball in play, it makes it a little bit better. But, like, the overall thing with the strikeouts, I'm looking at it right now coming into today. So last year they struck out 23.9% of the time. This year it's 24.8%. They're striking out more this year than they did last year, and nobody thinks that's the case. So it's wild, but the difference is, obviously, their on-base percentage last year, 315. This year it's 333. And that's basically all being driven by the jump in batting average. It was 235 last year. It's 257 this year. That's what's doing it. Like, there's no mystery here. It's the batting average is up, which has helped maintain, even though their ISO is down from 174 last year. So the isolated power was 174 last year. It's 150 this year, but their slugging is only down from 409 to 407 because they've managed to, boost their batting average. So right now the batting average is the thing that is sort of raising all boats offensively for them. And I think you can say that both things are probably true, that, again, regression is probably coming, but they're also probably better than they were last year at it. Where exactly that settles is probably going to go a long way to determining where the Brewers end up this season, right? Where that balancing point ends up being. And if I knew that, I would go to Vegas and put a lot of money down.
All right, next Patreon question comes from Brew Crew fan in California asking, will Keston Hiura replace Billy Joe Robideau as the greatest quad A player in Brewers history, or am I forgetting someone? So I looked up, Keston Hiura's got 7 home runs in 16 games, according to Baseball Reference here.
Yep.
Hitting 246, 324, 607 with a 930 OPS. He's also struck out 21 times in 68 plate appearances, but Ryan, is he settling into quad A territory for you, or is there still hope?
Well, so I was actually going to throw this back to you guys, because remember when it was an article of faith, Paul definitely will remember this. It was an article of faith. I think this was brought up in Moneyball among sabermetric types that 4A players aren't a thing. They don't actually exist.
Yep.
And I think as time has gone on, we've learned the folly of that. So I don't hold that as
kidding.
Yeah, I don't hold that as faith anymore, that 4A players don't exist.
Well, it never made sense because there is obviously a jump, and it's not linear. Like, you get a bunch of guys who are, like, if you're hitting against the top 3 guys in the major league rotation, they're way better than, the AAA rotation you're facing. So it never made a lot of sense that would be the case. And I think we can say that the 4A player is legitimately a thing at this point. There's going to be some guys who are right on the the median, just kind of by definition. The distribution of player talent is linear, and there's going to be some guys who are right there where they're at the top of AAA and not quite able to do it for various reasons of not having quite the right skill set up at the next level. And yeah, I think we got that going here. And here is I think a great example of it, where his tools are extremely limited in terms of defensive versatility and contact, but he can power it. So if your contact goes up a hair, you're all of a sudden an awesome player. But if it goes down, you become unplayable. And that's exactly what you're seeing here.
Yeah, and this came up, friend of the podcast, co-host of the RAE podcast with you, Jared Radcliffe brought this up when he was mashing during a day game this week, and pointing out that, like, Keston Hiura is not that old. He's 26 years old, and we have to look no further than our own, Nelson Cruz experience, where they dealt away Nelson Cruz when he was, like, about the age of Keston Hiura, and Cruz has gone on to have...
This was going to be my answer, by the way. Yeah, I have Nelson Cruz's B-Rep page. Yeah, mashed 20 home runs like 3 times in the Brewers system before he got dealt away. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the thing about this isn't... Well, so I'll give you the response that I gave to when he was discussing that with Ruby, was if he can figure out why he's so susceptible to high fastballs, and if the fix for that is, 1, something that he can do, that he's capable of doing, and 2, it doesn't drastically diminish his power, I think he can go on and be a star. Like, that's still possible. But the more time that goes on with him without him making that transition, the less likely you have to think it is that it's ever going to happen, right? So I don't know. We know what the problem is. Keston Hiura can't hit anything down the dick, basically. Like, he just can't. He cannot
above
do
the
it.
belt, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then anything above the belt, yeah. Like or in the higher, when they split the strike zone into thirds, yes. Anything in that top area, if it's a fastball that has any sort of spin, he just swings through it. So
can I throw out my quad A guy?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a better comp than Nelson Cruz, I think. Mine is Joey Meyer, a former very high pick. He has a rated rookie card for the Brewers. He hit 161 minor league and Japanese league home runs in 7 seasons, and only got a cup of coffee twice up with the major league crew for a lot of the reasons that Keston Hiura didn't stick around. Joey Meyer also didn't have a position. He was a hefty lad, couldn't play he's supposed to be an outfielder, couldn't play there, was not good enough defensively to play first base, but whenever he was in the minors, he destroyed people handily. So his slugging percentage across the board are always like 550 or higher, and just couldn't ever translate it to the majors because nutrition was different back then, or and exercise.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you have to say that it's very. I don't even want to say the word "very." That it is unlikely that Keston Hiura is going to turn into a star, but there's also the aspect of he is still young enough, and we have seen him be really, really good at the big league level. We've seen him be a star at the big league level with a bat. So add those two things up, and I don't know, like, it's certainly possible that he could once again, be a star. I just don't know how possible it is.
At least with the Brewers. Yeah. All right. Last couple of questions this week. Mark Podscarby, another one, asking, you guys discussed last week how FIP is runs, not earned runs. How does the Manfred runner affect that? Ryan, that's an interesting thing I hadn't thought about.
Yeah, so what you need to know, the Manfred runner does, when they come in and score, they count as a run. They do not count as an earned run. That run will never be earned by the pitcher, which obviously it would be totally unfair to make them accountable for a run that Manfred stuck on second base.
Yep.
So it would not make sense. But presumably, yes, it would track against like the runs allowed. So it shows up in that part of the pitcher's thing, which is why I think you're going to see pitchers like Devin Williams and people that would tend to pitch in the 9th and in the 10th inning So guys who are like closers are going to pick up a few of those a year, right? They're going to end up with a few unearned runs because of the Manfred man, and it is going to matter a little bit. I don't know, like when we say that it tracks against that FIP tracks against runs, not earned runs, what that means is that that's the number you have to compare it to. So FIP would be in comparison, if you want to compare it to something in terms of like how close is a pitcher to this number, or how close is a pitching staff to this number, that's what you're doing, is you're comparing it. But even then, it's still a pretty crude tool. FIP is not as good as, say, Sierra, and Sierra is not as good as Jonathan Judge's DRA at Baseball Prospectus. I think right now, in terms of the publicly available ERA estimators, DRA is the tops, right? I think they're.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't have any real question about that. So DRA is the thing there. But yeah, it's you always have to give a little bit of a wiggle room for this, and there will be regression to that. And I think you probably saw it today with the Brewers bullpen. I think the bullpen went a long ways towards closing the gap between its ERA and its all of the other things. It's DRA, it's FIP, whatever, what have you. A lot of that gap closed today. And that I kind of like that it came all in one game, because it can only hurt you that once. Like, that's having it all come in one game. I like it when regression is just gets out of the way. Yes, it's exactly how that works.
Yeah,
this is scientifically
pretty sure.
Yeah, this is scientifically based. And Jonathan, don't yell at us or me.
It's all good. Last one this week, Brian Polakowski asking, reports out of the RAE mini pod was that Paul cut his finger and had limited mouse skills. Curious if he's going to avoid an IL stint like the rest of the Brewers.
There we go.
He's showing it up for us. Yeah.
I was peeling a kiwi and I peeled my finger. And
oh no.
Yep. And it was awful, and bled like mad. But I think actually peelers are quite bad in terms of cuts, because they take a big chunk. And I basically couldn't type all day Friday for work or any other reason. It was really hacking me off. So it just Band-Aid came off. Yeah, James is doing the one finger old man typing, and that is what I was doing too. I'm all healed up now. I can type again. Band-Aid's off. It avoided infection, so we're back off the IL. We're good. Minimum stay is all we did.
There we go. Glad to hear it. Hopefully it doesn't affect your draft stock later this week either. So injury concerns there. All right, that'll do it for questions this week. Plenty of them. As we mentioned, if you want to make sure you get your question answered here and on Reporting as Eligible, go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you that question priority. And while you're out on the interwebs helping support us, you can go support us another way. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen to us. Give us a 5-star review while you're there. And also be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button to make sure you never miss an episode. This is a bit of a long one. A lot of thoughts over the last couple of games for the Brewers. But as I mentioned, still 2 more series to go in this homestand. Hopefully things go a little bit more smoothly in the next coming week. We'll be here next week to recap all of it. In the meantime, have a good week, everyone, and we'll see you here next time on Milwaukee's Tailgate.